Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Michael, the head of service development for Time for Thriving. You're tuned into the next instalment of Thrivein15. We're very pleased to have Robyn with us today. Robyn, would you kindly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I am an integrative counsellor, so I draw on a lot of CBT techniques to help people facilitate change. I've been with Health is One as an employee for about 5 years now, and that has really helped me kind of develop where my interest lies, where I'm kind of passionate, and CBT has really kind of fallen into that.
Fab, thanks, Robyn. So, for people who are completely new to it, how would you describe CBT in simple terms?
So the best way to explain what it is my work focuses on helping people understand the patterns between their thoughts, their feelings and behaviours, and recognising that while it all comes out differently for each person, they're all connected. So it really helps support people to make small practical shifts day to day that improve their overall well-being and how they respond to things. A nice way of explaining it. So we generally, depends on your age group, but know the reference to the film Gremlins. So if we think of that in the way that our thoughts can react, is if it was just one little creature that popped up to one unhelpful thought, then we might, like that first gremlin, we might not have had so much of a film. It might not have been so much chaos because you could capture it, figure out what to do with it, job done. The reason the film and our emotions and our behaviours sometimes can be chaotic is when there's multiple bouncing around at the same time, and it's sometimes dozens of them, and they all cause a little bit of chaos. So CBT techniques really help us understand what our gremlins are, what they're doing, where they're going, and kind of trying to rein that in and help us kind of make the changes that we need to edit it really for ourselves.
So what makes CBT different from other forms of therapy that other people may have heard of?
So CBT is very practical. It's very kind of focused on the here and now and making changes within that here and now. So we're, instead of explaining kind of where the problems have come from or where the kind of going into the history of it, what we find with CBT is it's looking at what they're doing right now in this moment and how can we respond differently to it. So sometimes I often talk about how we experience our feelings as they're automatically true. What my brain thinks is automatically fact. And CBT helps us kind of slow that down and recognize that they're not always accurate, they're not always helpful, and sometimes our brain just isn't our friend. Sometimes our brain just wants to work a little bit sideways to how we need it to work. So a lot of the time they're habits or mental, just automatic reactions to things, and not the response that we always have to have. So when we can see them that way as something that actually we have choice in our thoughts, we have choice and can be quite powerful in that we do have power of how we're going to react to something and what we respond with.
That's really useful information. Thank you. And what does a typical CBT session look like from start to end?
So we start by checking in. So every week or every fortnight when the client comes in, we're checking in on how have things been, what have you noticed, and kind of work on that. What's the focus for the session? So then it's very individual based. So what are the situations that can be quite triggering or a part of the problem for you? And then around that, then what are the thoughts, feelings, and behaviours associated with that? So once we understand that for each individual, we're looking at practical strategies to try in between sessions. So it's really collaborative work. It's really kind of bouncing ideas off each other and then setting up a plan. What are we going to go away and work on in the next week or in the next couple of weeks towards meeting the goal that you've set?
Okay, so can you share any like simple techniques that people might often find helpful in CBT?
Yeah. So very often it's about kind of learning to spot that first automatic thought, so that first gremlin. So those habits that we generally get sucked into. So for myself, I'm really transparent in we all have gremlins. I have gremlins. Okay. So mine are very much in, I can very quickly go, if I'm running late, if I hit a bit of traffic, I can very go in much, my automatic thoughts will go to fortune telling, I'm going to be late, make a big deal out of nothing, end up with myself really stressed, really like hot and flushed, and actually I'm not late for work at all because the traffic cleared. So a really simple CBT technique is by building a relationship with yourself, with what are those gremlins, what are your really sensitive ones that like to go, oh, that happened, I react like this. And if you can start to spot them and start to kind of challenge that, is it a fact, or is my mind writing a story? Is my mind trying to take me somewhere that isn't fact? So by using those skills, by pausing and having a look at that, naturally our brain wants to challenge it a little bit more. And the biggest thing with stepping back is we're just stopping it, or helping ourselves stop it from multiplying into getting into a state of panic or a state of kind of really low mood or hopelessness over something that the brain went, not what's true.
I love the association with gremlins and particularly the multiplying.
Yeah. And it's something that came to me. There's a few references to Gremlins as our thoughts being Gremlins, but the way of having that visual, because it's a film that is quite well known and it is really chaotic, doesn't mean that one on their own is necessarily dangerous. It just means that when they're bouncing around, there's so much going on. The whole reason that it's a horror film, I think that's the genre it fits in, is the whole reason that film is so chaotic is because no one really knows what they are or what they're doing or what their intention is. And I think that really helps with, if we start off with that mindset coming into CBT, to start trying to understand it, to start to try to go, right, what is your brain up to? What's the goal here? So for anxiety, for example, a lot of the time the brain is trying to help. It's trying to look into the future, see what the problem might be. Can I cope with that problem? So it's trying to help. The issue we've got is the method that it's using by putting that really scary crystal ball, this could happen in the future thought in. Our emotions react, our body reacts. Sometimes we'll start avoiding to keep ourselves safe. In day-to-day life, that can be quite unhelpful. It can be quite limiting. So by kind of understanding it as gremlins or as something else, it can just help have that, oh, that's a thing. It's not my brain is going there and that's what I have to follow. I find by giving it a slightly different identity, it can make it a little bit easier to challenge it because it has a different face.
If somebody is considering CBT, then what would you want them to know before starting?
So the biggest thing around CBT is we're working towards change. So it works best when the relationship works and both of us are actively involved and kind of committed to that change. So therapy isn't about any therapy isn't about coming to therapy, therapist gives advice, tells you what to do. It needs to be a team effort. The more work that you put in between sessions, the more you get out of it. So you're not going to come into therapy having the whole plan figured out, because that's generally what it can be used for, is figuring out where do you want to be. But I think that commitment to change and wanting change, if you come in with that and willing to do the work in between the sessions to give it a go, then you'll always learn something.
Is there any particular type person that benefits most from CBT?
So generally it's someone that wants something practical, something hands-on and tools to understand themselves and how to work their way to that goal. So it's really helpful for cycles of worry, as I mentioned earlier, with anxiety, kind of low mood, negative thoughts about someone themselves, or just really unhelpful habits in reactions. So sometimes another, again, the transparency, if I can be someone that can get quite wound up over something, I can be quite reactive. If it's just fight or flight, if I feel a bit under threat, sometimes that reactivity comes out. Where what you find is people that benefit really well with it is if they know that habit is to react, CBT can help unpick instead of reacting that way, how else can we try? Is there a different mindset that we can apply to this? So who benefits most? I guess it's someone that wants to change, but I think anyone really can benefit from it if it speaks to them.
Do you have any insights in how you think CBT could help a business or a team, Robyn?
Yeah, so actually most of my work is in EAP services, working with people within the workplace. I think because it's such a versatile form of therapy, and it's so kind of in the moment and forward based and change based, that it's a really useful tool in trying to keep people in work, helping people return from work, or helping people who are just struggling to balance kind of life things with work things. So I think CBT is a really, really useful tool to use within a team, within a workplace, because generally it's not an indefinite kind of form of therapy. There is a goal that's set really early on and we're working towards something. So it's something that is picked up a lot in my day-to-day work.
Do you find that sometimes it helps teams gel better and communicate better?
I think so, yeah. I think the more understanding that people can have over their personal stuff, their personal reactions to things, and that without judgment, understanding that our response isn't always the healthiest or the most helpful. And I think that's the lovely thing about CBT is it's working with fact rather than working with all the emotion and the background and the understanding. So it's that without any judgment, it's as easy as saying kind of, was that thought helpful to me? And if not, then we have a choice over what we do with it. So it can be really useful in teams with like relationships between people, because if we're dealing with one person that's struggling with kind of one baseline and someone else that's struggling with another baseline, sometimes we clash. So it can be really useful in just understanding yourself, your responses, and trying to find that helpful change and meeting in the middle.
Great. No, thanks for sharing that. And what's one small practical change that someone could make this week that would have a meaningful impact on their well-being?
I would say to try to meet yourself with the kindness and compassion that you'd offer anyone else. So you walk in a room and generally one of the most polite things that we do is, hey, how are you? And what I would recommend is take a moment every day or a couple of times a day to just go, right, how am I? Do I need anything right now? So no judgment, no further conversation of why we feel like that, but am I okay? Do I need anything? Because that simple kindness can really keep those gremlins at bay, because you're treating yourself with the same warmth, the same compassion that you give anyone else.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that there's a lot behind that, isn't there? Showing kindness to ourselves and other people. So I definitely subscribe to that thinking, Robyn. Well, look, that concludes our questioning for today, and thank you so much for joining us for this Thrivein15 session.